People who had someone condescendingly explain something that they didn't know you're an expert on. What happened? Had a friend of a friend explain the causes and effects of the American Civil War to me at a backyard party. I kept trying to take part in the conversation and he kept interrupting me. Finally our mutual friend, overhearing our conversation this guy's lecture, leans in and says, "You know she got her grad degree in this, right?" I'd love to say that learning about my credentials, so to speak, changed the tone or course of our conversation, but it didn't. Somehow it intensified his need to explain crap I can literally teach a class on to me. Classic. I had a sort of drive-by version. I was in a computer store getting a cable or something for a PC build. Customer next to me flags down the sales guy and asks to buy a sound card for their laptop. Sales looks at the lady like an idiot, then goes on for a minute or so about how they don't even make such a product. I got a PCMCIA sound card off the shelf behind the sales guy and handed it the customer, then walked away. I thought this story was a bit more recent and was expecting a USB sound card. Haven't thought about PCMCIA slots in years. I used to work in an air traffic control tower. We would fairly often have new pilots visit and see the airport and what happens from the air traffic control side of things. I was on a break when a particular pilot was visiting and was the only female air traffic controller in that workplace. The visiting pilot finishes his cup of coffee, hands me mug and says, "Wash that would you love." By the time he'd returned to his aircraft, my break was over. He unfortunately found himself at the back of a rather long departure queue. I wanted him to have some time listening to the frequency and absorbing the fact that if a woman is in a professional environment she's probably not the fricking tea lady. Every once in a while tech support will escalate an issue to me, and I'll have to listen to a customer try to explain to me how my own program works. I don't care how many times you tell me that it won't sync to the cloud. An application that doesn't even connect to the internet has never and will never do that. Not my story, but we had a few lectures at university given by the head of cardiology at the adjacent hospital. He told us about the time he was waiting to cross the road when a man next to him collapsed. As he knelt down to attend to him, a large lady strode over, physically lifted him, cardiologist not a large man, out of her way and said in a loud voice, "I'll take charge. I have a first aid certificate." When I got rear-ended and the head of neurology from one of the most famous hospitals in the USA stops to assist us the accident scene, I let him, school parent friend, was being discharged from a week-long hospital stay, GI, and even though I was ready to go home, I was still having some bouts of nausea, had been getting Zofran while inpatient, and asked the nurse if the discharging provider could send in a script for a few doses. In a sweet, sickly voice, she said, "Oh honey, Zofran only comes in IV form." I replied with, "Oh honey, I'm a pharmacist, and can assure you it also comes in tablets, liquid, and oral disintegrating tabs." She fumbled a bit, then mumbled something about checking with the doctor and quickly exited the room. I may not have perfectly mimicked her condescending tone, but I sure as heck tried. I've been in martial arts, Taekwondo, specifically, for 14 years, and I'm a 4th degree black belt. I don't claim to know everything, not even close, but I do know what I'm talking about. At my university, I decided to try out the Taekwondo club on campus. It was the first day I was trying it, and I didn't know if we were supposed to wear uniforms or not, so I went in with workout clothes but brought my full gear just in case. Before the class started, one of the leaders, who was wearing a 2nd degree black belt, nothing to sniff at, but still a difference of 5 years of training, came up to me and started explaining the general protocol of class and offered to stand next to me during the class to show me how to do the different steps. Throughout all of this, he seemed annoyed that he was having to explain everything, and generally like he didn't want new, inexperienced students. I politely agreed, and asked if we should wear our uniforms for the class. He explained that if we had them we should, but it wasn't a problem if I didn't have one. I explained that I did have one, and said I'd be right back, then proceeded to go change into my uniform. His eyes nearly popped out of his head when he saw me walk out with my instructor's uniform and 4th degree belt. Worked at a quilt store for 5 years. I'm male and was in my late 20s at the time. I got this pretty much every day. Eventually I just started working on my own projects in the store in front of people so they could see that I was a better quilter than them before they started talking down to me and asking if the owner was my mother. Girl in a hardware store. I feel you. I'm a neuroscience PhD candidate with a focus on neuroimmunology, and I can't count the number of times anti-vax mommy bloggers have tried to explain the supposed link between vaccines and autism to me, or just generally neuroscience and immunology. Full stop. Unfortunately, no matter how much science I clearly spell out for them, it's never enough, and they just yell that I'm clearly on Big Pharma's payroll. So, I just go home, snuggle with my cats, and dream of having Big Pharma money instead of academia money. You need to research what aircraft carriers are like before you attempt to write a book about one. A member of my writer's workshop after reading a scene in which I described an aircraft carrier as creaking. I have sailed on the USS Eisenhower. Not me, but a professor told this story to us. He was at a chain store looking for some fertilizer. A younger employee asked if he needed help finding something and he said he was looking for insert NPK ratio. The employee then went on to thoroughly teach him about how those numbers are really percentages of how much elemental nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are in the mix, and the rest of the percentage missing is just filler stuff. My professor has a PhD in soil science. The employee was not correct, but he decided to just let it slide since he was so enthusiastic. These are things that are kind of drilled into you in basic soils and soil fertility classes. To us nerds this is kind of funny. Not exactly an expert, but I overheard my Italian-American co-worker telling another co-worker that tiramisu is Japanese. His explanation was pretty in-depth. According to him, the Japanese invented it, which is why it has the phonetic structure that it does. He even pronounced it with a Japanese accent Tiramisu, but that the French had perfected it, creating the modern version most people are familiar with. I'm also Italian-American. Tiramisu is Italian for pick me up. I didn't have the heart to destroy him in front of our other co-worker, but I'll laugh quietly to myself now whenever someone mentions tiramisu. I am doctor in the UK. I went for my compulsory basic training day to learn ride a motorbike and I was in a group of 6 others. It was a very hot day and none of us were used to being in full leathers. One of the group overheated and felt faint and sick, so took some time out and went to sit down. I went to get him some water and to see if he's okay, but the instructor freaked out and told me to stay away and call for help. The guy was alert and sat up, he just needed to cool off. I again tried to just go over and see if the overheated guy was okay, but the instructor kept yelling at me to keep back and that he will handle this. He was completely panicking and yelling at someone to call 999 as the guy was quite sweaty and faint. After multiple attempts of telling the instructor that I'm a doctor and if I could just go and see if the guy's okay, we may not need to call an ambulance, he then eventually listened. After 10 minutes of cooling down in some water, the guy was fine and got picked up. We carried on with our training, but not after the instructor asked me how long I'd been a nurse for and why I went into nursing. I'm female and this happens a lot. I thought that you meant all doctors in the UK were required to do a training day on how to ride a motorcycle. Had a nurse explain that I needed to drink more water so more oxygen would get to my brain. At my questioning look, he explained that H2O dissolved into oxygen and hydrogen, and the oxygen travels to the brain. I'm a chemist. Yes, I called the clinic director. Oh god, I would have requested a new nurse. I was working with a scaffold company right after I finished my degree while looking for a job in mining engineering. We came across some pyrite and one of the guys thought it was gold. I basically explained it's not because it's hard, to which he replied with, "What are you, some kind of rock specialist?" My answer was a polite but firm yes. When I was pregnant I was drinking a decaf iced latte. I had some woman in line at the pharmacy tell me the caffeine was going to rearrange the genes in my baby's brain. I'm a geneticist. I actually couldn't even come up with a response. I just stood there somewhat dumbfounded at the absurdity of it all. Just keep drinking coffee until you've rolled the stats you want. People explain medical things to me on a fairly regular basis. Unless they're being a total dong, I kind of gently let them know I'm a doctor and explain what they said back to them in the right way. All the time on Reddit, people like to try and explain legal matters to me despite the fact I'm a lawyer. It's even better when you get banned from our legal advice for going against the hive mind there. I think half the folks on our lawyers who have posted on our legal advice have been banned for giving wrong answers that the hive didn't want to hear. Long ago I worked as the cheese guy at Whole Foods, where we were trained that no matter what the customer is always right. A lady came up to me, critical that I didn't have the ostrich cheese prominently displayed. Ostriches are birds. Cheese comes from milk. Milk comes from nothing like getting called an idiot and societal scum who probably can't read by a woman who thinks ostrich cheese exists. I had just graduated from a top university, was working at Whole Foods briefly after some crazy crap went down in Katrina. What a wild ride. Sounds like she's the kind of person who goes to an auto parts store for blinker fluid. A contractor was asking if I knew how sagging a traffic signal span wire worked and asked if I ever took physics in high school. I told him I had a bachelor's of civil engineering, so he asked if I had my professional engineer's license and I said yes, do you? Knowing that he didn't. He didn't answer and we finished the conversation. Then I watched him walk across the parking lot and realize he locked his keys in his truck. There was a guy at work who I get on well with. One day he was explaining the manual. I told him no, that's not how it reads. It links to this and that thing is referenced by that. Blah blah. He gets super defensive and condescending, then says, what makes you the freaking expert? I wrote it. Academic orgasm. I am a woman that's been working in a hardware store for 12 years. That's all I need to say. I work industrial maintenance, so pretty much every shift I have some crackhead operator telling me how to do the easiest parts of my job. Bro, I know how auto darkening welding helmets work. I know that hot crap is hot. Lockout tags exist because I don't trust morons to keep me alive, not because I'm worried about the machine trying to kill me. Electrical troubleshooting is not always just checking the fuse. I could write a book on all the dumb crap I have to hear while I'm working on broken equipment. Of course the fixtures are crap. They do the job. They don't have to look amazing to do it. We don't sell amazing looking fixtures. We sell the parts we put in boxes. I once worked for a small company where I did software development, wrote the documentation, and even fielded tech support calls about a product I'd worked on when the tier 1 support, not that we called it that, couldn't figure it out. At one point I had a customer tell me what a particular statement in a manual meant. They claimed it stated that the software we sold was only compatible with 3 or 4 programs, when in fact it listed those programs as examples of other programs it would work with. It would actually work with most programs of that type, specifically Apple II's 16-bit GUI software rather than the 8-bit Apple II software. I had the pleasure of telling the customer that I had in fact written that manual and my interpretation of that sentence was canonical. I was picked up by an old taxi driver on my way to a scatter park with my skateboard. He rudely demanded to know where I had been skateboarding. Nowhere yet. I was on my way to the park. He informed me that if I collided with someone his age on the sidewalk they had an 80% chance of dying from a brain hemorrhage. I politely informed him that this was unlikely and that I hadn't been skating on the sidewalk. He then told me to ask anyone in the medical profession and they will confirm it. I then politely informed him that I'm a doctor and he changed his manner with me completely and became very respectful and interested once he realized I wasn't just some skater punk. My little brother's friend who has worked in marketing for 6 months tried to explain how he cracked Google's SEO algorithm and could get anything to the front page of Google in a week. I've worked knee deep in SEO for almost a decade and I still have little to no idea what drives the algorithm other than speculation and trial and error. I just smiled and nodded while he told me image file names play a huge role in page ranking. I swear 90% of people who claim to know anything about SEO just learned what SEO stands for that morning. Not quite exactly the parameters you're looking for, but still an experience I remember. We had a new person show up and maybe she was just cranky from the 12-hour transatlantic flight or something. But when shown her new office desk area she immediately started complaining about there being dust. It was Baghdad. Dust is everywhere. She's being vocal about it when 2 men walk by. They hear her and ask what the issue is. She starts complaining that it's her first night arrival here and she was disrespected by being shown a dirty desk. So one of the guys rummages around and finds some wipes and starts cleaning up the offensive area. She complained about her flight and about several things as the guy just silently wiped stuff down. She was nice enough to say thanks and him and the other guy left. Then in a curious tone she asked who he was. Our co-worker was like, the country manager just cleaned your desk for you. Her face dropped. I filed that away for a few reasons. One is that you're never too good to do the jobs you expect of your subordinates. Him cleaning her desk. 2 is that there's something special about humility and common courtesy, not throwing around status. And 3 that there's no reason to make people feel like crap just because you can, not trying to correct her or embarrass her by tossing around authority. I once had a lady try to explain the best handy techniques to me. Aggressively twist your hands in opposing directions, as though giving an Indian burn. I'm a young woman who has been playing Dungeons and Dragons and similar role-playing games since I was a child, almost 2 decades now. I've played almost every week in some way or another for the last 10ish years. I actually have a side job writing system agnostic content for tabletop RPGs. Almost every time I encounter a new group or talk about my interest in a public setting, say a party or something, some dude has to come out of the woodwork and try to explain to me how the game works. I've become very good at casually mentioning how long I've been playing. Usually that gets the hint across, but some still keep right on going. Thank you for creating content that isn't locked into one set of rules. Heck, thank you for creating content. Had a cashier get snotty with me when I told him he needed to hit F5 to get back from the credit card screen. He went into a several minute tirade about how he had been using the software for years and that's not how it worked, then explained something about computers, then on a tangent about how they log his key presses, then something about the servers upstairs and how they're connected to the cloud. I finally had to interrupt him with, dude, I helped write this software. Nothing you said, it's right. He then stormed off from the register and I just stood there awkward till a manager showed up and pressed F5. This is funny because I work for a point of sale software vendor and one of the recent patches causes a bug in the way it handles the manual credit card entry window. Occasionally it doesn't close automatically and you have to hit F5 as a workaround to refresh and close it. Someone on Reddit 2 days ago telling me how insurance companies work and how I am spreading fake news. I was sitting at Midwest HQ of one of the largest insurance companies in the USA meeting with their underwriters 2 hours prior. If there's anything I've learned from discussing my own career specialties on Reddit, it's that Reddit has no freaking clue what they're talking about. The hive mind is reactionary about news and pedantic about everything while only having at best a surface level understanding of most issues. Friend's brother wanted to install new speakers in his car. Amplifier is rated for 4 ohms, so there was no possible way to use these 2 8-ohm speakers because it would blow up the amplifier. His dad joined in and argued with me too. Neither would listen to a word I said until I mentioned that I'm 5 years into an electrical engineering degree, have designed and built a handful of amplifiers, and designed and built a dozen guitar speaker cabinets. Their tone totally changed after that, haha. Don't know if he ever installed them though. I had a 15-ish-year-old boy explain how helicopters work to me, badly. I never told him I used to be a helicopter mechanic. Everyone knows that the helicopter is the result of 100 mechanical engineers trying to design an airplane. The worst is when there is a competition and the correct answer is wrong or a misconception. It happens every day. I'm a PhD chemist in a sea of BS chemical engineers who think they know everything. One of them even told me to use acetone to put out a fire. That'll work. It will use up all the oxygen and burn out, as long as that's the limiting reagent. Well, it was the other way around for me. I wasn't condescending. I just thought he was new and I wanted to be nice. I was working in this big company. I was nervous and I really didn't want to screw up or do or ask something stupid. A couple of months in, there was this new guy in our project, around my age. One day he asked me about some procedures and later he asked me about some calculations. I thought it would be kind of me to treat him as I would like to be treated, so I explained what he asked and kindly showed him some general things about the project. In this folder you can find what every other discipline is doing, or for this you might want to check the original drawings. It helped me a lot and so on. Since he looked my age and he seemed to be a little lost, I just assumed he was a freshly graduated engineer like myself. He was not. He just had a young face, but he had 5-6 years of experience and had even previously worked in this same company years ago, and now he came back. I was getting a drink at an airport bar next to some guys talking about the recent strikes in Syria. The guy said they launched Tomahawks off the aircraft carrier. I spoke up kind of friendly that it was from a carrier strike group, not the carrier itself. He said no, they launched Tomahawks from the aircraft carrier. I said no, they launched Tomcats, the aircraft off carriers, but Tomahawk missiles only launch from destroyers, cruisers and subs. Cue about 5 minutes of him explaining how he knew a guy who was in the Navy and he was pretty sure he knew what he was talking about. Mind you, this was a friendly conversation, so I got to smile and drop the bomb on him in an all-around good way. I was a Timorak fire controlman in the Navy and helped launch area coordinate in the Red Sea during the gas attack crisis. I work in digital marketing with a focus on search engine marketing, SEM, and search engine optimization, SEO. Been doing it for about 17-18 years now. Both are initialisms, so you pronounce each letter as in SEEM and SEO, just like the CIA isn't pronounced Kia but CIA. Had a guy ask me if I'd heard of SEO. That's how he pronounced SEO. I was perplexed, and he being in IT, though maybe it was something I was not familiar with, like if someone asked if I knew what REST or Agile or SQL referred to. I said as much and he laughed. I thought someone in marketing would have heard of search engine optimization. Lols. He was a dong about it, so I was more than happy to correct him in front of his peers. In tech support, I had a guy that kept asking me what this Skype thing was on his desktop. I had no idea what he was talking about. Right after I hung up, a light bulb went off that he was pronouncing Skype as Skype. After 5 years of being the one usually in charge of making dinner, my husband told me that if I added butter and a bit of milk to the boiled potatoes, I could make mashed potatoes. Where do you think the mashed potatoes you've been eating monthly for the last 5 years came from? My brother-in-law was very confused when my sister made him mashed potatoes by using milk and butter. His mother had always just mashed them up. He hated mashed potatoes until he tried my sister's. One of my ex's party where most people had a boring IT job, including me. People in those parties had this tendency to showcase how insanely cool their life was. This guy, long hair, beard, tattoo, in particular, decided to have an argument with me and started telling me that my taste in music sucks and that I should start listening to some of the non-mainstream stuff. When I asked him to name a few artists, he mentioned a few names. I told him to look up the guitar player for one of those bands he mentioned, which was me. It felt good. This one is my favorite. So I'm working on a PhD in math, and every Friday, some friends from my department and I go to happy hour at this pretty chill bar downtown to play pool. There was one Friday that we were particularly sucking, but weren't exactly trying our hardest. We've probably been trying to sink the last 3 balls for about 4 rounds at this point, when this guy at the table next to ours saunters over and in his infinite, tipsy wisdom proceeds to tell 4 math grad students that pool is as easy as identifying tangent lines. It's all about the tangent lines. It took about 2 minutes of this guy trying to explain this to us before my friend chimes in with, "Yeah, we're all working on PhDs in math. We know plenty about tangent lines. Let me give you a counterexample to explain why you're wrong." The guy's eyes got so wide, lol. He didn't say much to us after that. The other way around, though I don't think I was condescending. I was explaining to her new neighbor how the town did things. A few minutes later, she said they moved here for her husband's job, which was working for the township. I there came across that at least a few times, regarding things like engines, cars, airplanes etc, and about flying in general. I was an aircraft mechanic, USAF, and a student pilot at one time. Usually I just laugh it off, sometimes simply restating the BS correctly without making an argument over it. One time though comes to mind that was dang funny. I was looking at cars in a showroom, just there to look, at a Jaguar dealer. The salesman starts talking to me and my friend about the V12 in the 70s, Jaguar XL12. He's going on about the engine and why it's so fast and finally goes, It's got the same fuel injection system as a F4 fighter jet, so I say really acting all impressed and surprised, the same fuel injection as a General Electric J79 turbojet. Funny since that burns JP4, which is basically a gasoline and kerosene mix. How does that work? He just stopped mid-sentence and walked out of the showroom. Didn't see him again as long as we were there looking around. I wonder how many suckers he's gotten with that line. Kind of the opposite happened to me. I used to work IT for a team that designed and built computer chipsets. One of the engineers was having a problem powering off a computer. I offered my advice thus: press and hold the power button for at least 5 seconds. That should force a shutdown. I wrote the BIOS for this chipset. I'm sure that won't work, he retorted. I pressed the power button, counted silently to 5, and the computer shut itself off. He roared with laughter and later admitted that he'd forgotten that his brother helped him with a few things on that project. At least he had a sense of humor about it. He roared with laughter and later admitted, "These are my favorite kind of people. If you are delighted when proven wrong, you have a long life of happiness and learning ahead of you." Someone told me they could weld copper to steel. I have forgotten more about my trade over the years than most people would ever know. A flat earther tried to pull her, "So you think it was easier to get to the moon than fake the footage?" As a professional VFX artist that knows very much about visual manipulation technology of the past and present, in my professional opinion, yes. You have been visited by the party pug. He just wants you to celebrate with him. Comment woohoo to celebrate with the party pug. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.